Hello, and welcome to the Space King podcast, where all things converge, from the innermost depths of the mind to the outer reaches of the cosmos. This is your reality.
Conspiracies. I'm your co-host David, along with Jericho. How are you doing tonight, my friend?
I'm doing pretty good tonight, David. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. This is one of my favorite things to discuss. It's conspiracies. So I'm looking forward to it tonight.
Good. I'm looking forward to it too. I hear we got some people that are actually excited to hear about conspiracy theories tonight, so we'll hope to hopefully get that itch that they're having. Scratch it for them.
And just a reminder to everyone that if you want to be part of the show, you can click on the link for Discord, go into the podcast waiting room, and we'll bring you in and we'll discuss conspiracies with you. And also you can contact me or Jericho in the Discord. You can message us. I'm Sentinel and Jericho is Space King.
All right. So I hear you got some interesting ones for me tonight.
Yes, I do. We're going to start out with the first one here tonight. And this one is kind of crazy.
All right.
I hadn't heard about it before. When I started doing research for tonight's show, I came across this, and I'm like, this is just too kooky. This is nuts. I can't do this. And then as I started looking into it, like all good conspiracies, I was like, wait a minute, this might actually make sense. So this one involves the Beatles. Okay, so we're all familiar with the Beatles.
The band, right?
Yes, the Beatles, the band.
For some of our younger viewers out there, if you don't know who it might be, the Beatles were you go ahead. You would know more about them than I would.
Well, yeah, they were a huge phenomena, the Beatles, back in the 60s. Beatlemania. They were the first part of the British invasion that came to the US, and all other bands that came from England followed them. And they were just huge. I mean, unbelievably big. And so this story involves Paul McCartney. And what happened in 1906.
Who was he in the band?
Oh, Paul McCartney was one of the lead singers and the bassist. The band consisted of Paul, John, Ringo, and George Harrison. George was the guitarist, rhythm guitarist. Then you had John Lennon, who played guitar. Ringo was their drummer, and Paul was the bassist. And they became, like I said, very famous. They came to the US, and it was like nothing no one had ever seen before. I mean, fans were going crazy. They went on like Ed Sullivan back in the day, which was a big TV show. I mean, girls are fainting in the audience. People were going absolutely nuts. There was rumors, or not rumors, these were actual facts that happened, that police officers reported in England when the Beatles would show up for a show, these girls were so crazy and losing their minds that there was actually, like, police officers described it as a river of urine flowing down the street, because these girls were so crazed out of their minds that they lost their bodily functions and didn't realize it.
Wow.
That's how insane people were for the Beatles. Okay. And they were great musicians. Their career went on for a long time and produced many great albums. And if you don't know who they are, look them up on YouTube. You should definitely, if you like music, listen and learn something about the Beatles. So this conspiracy involves them. And what this conspiracy is that in 1966, Paul McCartney had a deadly car accident and died.
Okay.
And they replaced him.
With a fake Paul McCartney?
With a lookalike, yes. With somebody else. So what happened is, supposedly they were working on the Sgt. Pepper's album, okay? And this is one of their more famous albums. And there was an argument. Paul left early in the morning in November of 1966, and was, racing down the street with his car and everything, and had an accident and was decapitated. This is how the story goes.
Okay.
And Brian Epstein, who was their manager producer, supposedly bribed police and photographers and the press to like keep this hush. Do not report on this. This cannot come out that he is dead. It's going to cause problems. Okay, supposedly even MI5 got involved with this to also keep this quiet, because of the fact that the fans were so crazy. These girls were so insane for the Beatles, and Paul was kind of like he was like the main focus guy in the band that a lot of the girls were crazy for. They were crazy for all of them, but they were really crazy for Paul.
So do you want to go on and explain what MI5 is for people who might not know?
Well, yeah, that's what I'm about to say. MI5 is it's equivalent to like our CIA over there. That's their intelligence agency. I forget exactly what MI5 stands for. I think MI5 is the internal, MI6 is their external. So MI5 would be like our FBI, and I think MI6 is like our CIA. If I may have that mixed up, but that's what they do. One is FBI, one is CIA. So MI5 doesn't want this to come out because they're worried about mass suicides, because these girls are so crazed in the head that if Paul dies, the Beatles break up, there will be no more Beatles. My life isn't worth living. And they were real. This was a real concern that MI5 had. Like there has been actual records that this was a concern from MI5. They also wanted to control the Beatles, MI5, because they had so much influence at the time. And they were like, if we can somehow get these guys to work for us or do stuff for us, it would be, great. So supposedly he dies. They're trying to hush this whole thing up. And a few years earlier, Brian Epstein had run a look-alike contest. And this also involved Dick Clark and Teen Beat magazine, supposedly, to do a look-alike contest for members of the Beatles. There was never any winners pronounced in this contest that took place. And the reason is because their manager, Epstein, was looking for lookalikes for security reasons. Because they were having such security problem. Exactly, to have body doubles and all this kind of stuff. And one of the winners, his name was William Campbell Shears, also known as Billy Shears. And he was one of supposedly the winners, and he went to work in 1966 for the Beatles as one of the body doubles for security reasons.
Probably got paid a lot.
Yeah, I'm sure he did. Yeah. So when McCartney dies, Epstein approaches him and says, "I want you to replace Paul temporarily." Now, this was only supposed to be a temporary thing, just until like the band could figure out exactly what they were going to do, how they were going to release the information, and kind of let it come out slowly and stuff. They didn't want to have a big mess on their hands. Is what happened. And so a meeting takes place in Paris, supposedly, with Epstein, William Campbell Shears, John Lennon, and I guess maybe two other people who are closely involved with the band, management-wise. And they're talking to John Lennon and telling them what's going on. John realizes that this isn't a joke. At first, he thought they were kidding. Well, I guess, according to the story, John just goes ballistic. He starts throwing stuff around the room. He's yelling and screaming, "Are you freaking kidding me? What do how can we possibly do this to Paul's memory?" And all this. And they try and tell him, he storms out. He's gone. So the rest of them, they sit there and they discuss it a little more and decide what they're going. And then later, they catch up with John. Brian Epstein catches up with John and says to John, "Where are you with this?" And John says, "I have nothing to say, but okay, whatever." So he agrees, but he's just like, whatever. I mean, his best friend just died,
Yeah.
and now you want to do this. And people say, well, why would they do this? Why would they replace them? Why would the band do it? Why would the manager do it? Why would all these there's millions of reasons why people would go along with this. They were such a phenomenon. There was so much money being made, and money is a big factor with this type of thing.
I mean, and it was it was probably the biggest band at the time, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Paul McCartney to this day is believe it or not, he is the world's richest musician.
Oh, wow.
He is the world's richest musician because of all of the songwritings that he's done and all the stuff that he owns. He is the richest. So, there's a lot of reasons to cover this up. People are making big money. This is a big deal. But it's only supposed to be a temporary thing. But what ends up happening is no one notices that it's not Paul.
Oh, wow.
Like the press, no one realizes it isn't him. And so it goes on for like a week, and then it goes on for like another week. And eventually it gets out of hand where it's like, well, wait a minute, we've waited too long now. We can't come out and say Paul died and we replaced him with a lookalike.
Even worse.
This is, it gets to the point now where the lie has grown out of control. So now, what happens at that point? You're worried. They could be charged with felonies and all sorts of stuff. I mean, if someone dies and you don't report it, mm-hmm. I mean, that's a big deal. I mean, they could get into serious trouble for this now. Okay?
Yeah.
So the lie just continues. And what happens is that if you look at Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band album, there's supposedly all sorts of clues in there that Paul died because the band, the other band members felt so guilty about doing this that they just, in all their consecutive albums, they leave clues to the fact that Paul is dead. And one of them is that the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Heart Club Band album is supposedly, the conspiracy is that it's a funeral procession. And that you can see Paul's guitar laying on what is the coffin. And if you also look at where it has the stuff for the band spelled out and the cover and everything, it says in there, Paul is dead. And in one of the songs, if you play it backwards, I forget which song it is, it says Paul is dead. And also in one other song, at the end of the song, it's kind of muffled in the background because there's like a lot of different things going on. But you hear John Lennon say, I buried Paul.
Oh, wow.
They asked John Lennon about this, and he said, no, I didn't say that. I said cranberry sauce. Now, wait a minute. I buried Paul and cranberry sauce sound nothing alike. So this is really, crazy. There's also been a lot of other things too with people who are into this conspiracy that if you look at Paul's height before 1966 and look at his height after 1966, this is kind of an acknowledged thing that Paul grew by 2 inches.
Oh, wow.
It's like, wait a minute, what do you mean he grew by 2 inches? How's that possible? But if you look at all the pictures, and this is even people who don't believe the conspiracy are kind of like, yeah, he is taller, but maybe it's just the shoes he was wearing or something. But there's a lot of things about that. Also, his eye color changes. Goes from being a dark brown to almost a hazel green color. So now you have this on top of it. There's also... Go ahead.
I think I've actually heard of this before, but I heard someone mention it once, but that was it. I never heard anything past that.
Yeah, I mean, I had never heard of this before. To me, this is what I was like, this is just insane. It can't possibly be true. But there's all these things when you start looking into it and you see photographs and all this. And one of the things is his ears. In the original Paul, before 1966, his earlobes are attached. After 1966, his earlobes are not attached. Okay?
Okay, if this is true at this point, it's most definitely a different person.
Yeah, well, it even gets better. In the late 70s, okay, a Italian face recognition group, this company that does facial recognitions, did a, or no, not in the 70s. Why did I say the 70s? This was done in the 90s. I'm sorry. They used face recognition software to look at pre 1966 Paul and post 1966 Paul. And they came to the conclusion that it is not the same person.
Oh, wow.
And this is with facial recognition software. Now, what we've all been told is how great facial recognition software is.
How accurate it
certain
is.
points, certain points on the eyes, the placement of the chin, these things don't change regardless of age, and time. And supposedly, it's not the same person, they say. And also in 1966, that was the year the Beatles stopped touring. After that date, they never did a live concert again.
They didn't want people to see the new Paul up there and expect him to say something or sing because his voice would have been a dead giveaway.
Well, that's supposedly thing. Now, supposedly, Billy Spears was a talented musician. He could sing, he could play. There was even some comments, I guess, rumors that he was actually a better musician than Paul was.
But it was a different voice, I'm sure. If he had started singing, they would have known right away.
Exactly. And so that's why, so they never toured ever again after that, which is amazing. I mean, these guys, what you got to understand is that I forget which year it was, but it was a couple years. They held the top 5 spots on Billboard. They held 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 with their songs over like several years. Okay. Wow. That's how huge the Beatles were. There's a lot of these little things about it that just like, you're like, well, that kind of makes sense. Well, wait a minute. He's taller. His eye color is different. They're no longer touring. And they also, after 1966, they all grew beards.
To help cover up his face.
That helps cover up, supposedly, his face. But if you look at the picture there is a picture of Billy Spears and Paul McCartney from when he, supposedly the picture of him. I mean, it looks like it's like, oh my God, it's Paul McCartney. When you see the two of them together, the one is of the guy, William Spears, supposedly from entering the contest, and the other one is of Paul McCartney. And it's like, man, he looks just like him. It's unbelievable.
Wow.
And I'm going to get that picture up in the Discord here as quickly as I can, so you can take a look at it, and also anyone else can take a look at it too. But it's just a crazy conspiracy, and the clues that continue throughout the albums, in consecutive albums. In the, which one is it? The Abbey Road album, where I don't know if you've seen that famous picture where they're crossing the street.
Crossing the road, yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah. Well, in that photograph, part of the conspiracy is, according to fans, is that John is wearing white in that to represent the minister, thing like that. Ringo is wearing black because he is pallbearer. George, who's at the end, is wearing denim because he's the gravedigger, and Paul has no shoes on because he's the corpse.
Oh man.
And supposedly in the back of the picture there's a beetle bug, and on the license plate it has letters and then a number, and so it's the date of how old Paul would have been. He would have been turning the age that's on the license plate, which is, I forget what they say, it's 28 maybe, I think, or whatever it said. But supposedly he would have been turning that age. There's just all sorts of things that people point to in the albums and stuff as clues. And also, now here's another big kicker. When George Harrison passed away, he died of cancer, and supposedly on his deathbed, he made a confession. And his confession was that they replaced Paul.
Wow.
And there was a recording made of it, and there was a book written, which I believe the book was called Confession of a Dying Man, George Harrison's Last Words, or something like that, to that effect. And the tape was sent to a radio station. They played it, and it's been analyzed, and supposedly, according to voice analyzation record, yes, that's George Harrison speaking, and he says that they replaced Paul, and that it was, only supposed to be a temporary thing, and then it just turned into this thing, and that's why they broke up. Because William Campbell Spears, he could play, he could sing, and he could write. He helped with songs on the other albums and all that, but he could not get along with John Lennon. Him and John Lennon were like oil and water, I guess.
Well,
they just did not get along.
It's probably because he didn't want anyone to replace Paul anyways and make it up, and then here's this person that looks like Paul replacing Paul, and it sounded like he really liked, it sounded like Paul was his friend. So then they have this fake Paul there, and I'm sure that emotionally and psychologically, I'm sure that wasn't good for John.
Yeah, I mean, that's just, here you have a guy who looks just like your friend. He's in the band now. In public, you have to call him Paul. It's going to screw with your head.
Yep.
It's just a crazy conspiracy. But when you look at all the little details about it, and you look at what this guy looked like, and then the height's difference and all these things, it's like, maybe it's true, And now, you definitely aren't going to come out and confess to it now. It's serious crimes now. The other thing is that, the Paul McCartney of today, people are like, well, why would he continue to perpetrate, such a lie? It's like, well, one, he'd get in trouble. Two, he's going to lose all the royalties to any of the Beatles songs. Okay. Now he'll keep the royalties to all the songs that he did with Wings, because those were his songs that he wrote. But he's going to lose anything that had to do with the Beatles. And there's going to be huge lawsuits. It causes problems because if any of the Beatles songs that he had owned were sold, that supposedly the fake McCartney owned, and then he sold any of his rights, well, now those rights are going to be in, suspicion, because you can't be selling those rights. You were never really Paul. It turns into a huge mess.
Yep.
So the only two, of course, John Lennon was shot. What was that, in the 80s?
Probably for trying to go public.
Who knows? There's a whole conspiracy about the guy that shot John Lennon, and that after he shot him, he was supposedly had he did have the book Catcher in the Rye, which is supposedly one of the books they use for programming people, and stuff like that. So it's just, there's a whole lot there. There's a lot of smoke. I don't know if there's fire, but there's a lot of smoke. And it's just one of those things that's so crazy it could actually be true.
Yeah,
so insane.
If all those details are true, then it very well could be true. The whole thing.
Exactly. So anyone that's interested in more of this stuff, look up the things about it. You can, like I said, we'll put it in our thing like we always do in our news, so you can read more about it. But if you look at the album covers and you look at the things that they talk about, it's like, well, okay, it's there, maybe it's true. So it's just really one of the more compelling stories I came across, and it just kind of rocked my mind. It's like, this is so crazy. I love it. So, but that's it. Yeah. So I don't know. What do you think?
I think it's definitely possible. Like I said, if all those facts are true, then the facts stack up and say that it is true. If that's the case.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I believe the powers to be have done much, much worse and covered it up. So I wouldn't be surprised if something like this they covered up too for money.
Yeah, exactly.
And thinking that there would be a public, like you said, mass suicide potentially and all that stuff. Of course they would cover it up. They don't want millions of people who are losing their body functions in the street to get heartbroken and kill themselves because they don't think they can live. Because a person died. That's crazy. So of course they'd probably cover that up.
And supposedly, I guess And I don't know if there was any control going on by British intelligence, but supposedly they wanted to get their, like I said, they wanted to get their hooks into the Beatles. But they were trying to do that.
Yep.
I just uploaded that picture into the news if you want to take a look at the two faces there, Paul McCartney and William Sears Campbell.
They have different faces. The picture of Williams Campbell, he has a larger chin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of the things. His face is longer. That's one of the things they talk about. But
his
they
nose
look a lot
is
alike.
different though too. Yeah, no, they do look an awful lot alike. But if you're looking side by side, William Campbell, his nose goes down a little bit more, where Paul McCartney's flares up.
Yep, that's one of the things they
And
talk
Paul
about.
McCartney's ears stick out more, where Campbell's come in more.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, if they tried to pass him off,
They easily could.
They could, yeah. They
Back
could.
then, it's not like everybody could get on the internet and put the picture side by side and see.
Yeah, exactly. And even today, there's rumors of celebrities who've supposedly died, but they're still around, and people are like, it's not the real person,
Well, especially since a lot of celebrities today, well, not a lot, but a lot more than they used to, wear masks and stuff to hide their identity to begin with. Not to hide their identity, but just they wear masks as part of their performance. If they died, all they had to do is be the same rough height and everything, and they could just, I don't know, they wouldn't know.
Yeah. It's so crazy. So crazy. But like I said, it's interesting, and there's a lot of stuff that says it could be him. Could have happened.
I think it's a very good possibility.
Yeah. And so I guess Ringo, like I said, George Harrison died, John Lennon died, Paul McCartney is still alive, and Ringo Starr, the drummer, is still alive. And so you got Ringo and Paul. So unless Ringo's going to come out and make a confession, I don't think Paul's saying anything.
Yeah, that's probably not going to happen. But good.
Now I was going to say, so what do you got for us tonight?
All right, so I have three different things I have selected for tonight to talk about, but I need you to do me a favor and pick a number between 1 and 3, including 1 and 3.
Okay, I'll say 3.
All right, so with that being said, the first one we're going to get into has to do with the Illuminati.
Aha, all right, our favorite friendly group.
Your friendly neighborhood globalist. Except they probably don't live in your neighborhood, because they probably live secluded somewhere in the middle of nowhere with big walls around their property.
Yeah.
But anyways, I'm getting off topic. So tonight, what I have for you guys is, we all know about the Illuminati. The Illuminati is a conspiracy theory in and of itself. But since around the election time for President Trump, the globalists started coming out and saying, yes, we do exist. We're an organization that doesn't exist. We do exist, and we think that we believe that things should be this way and that way. Everybody knows the globalists are real now. They came out and they admitted it, and they talked about it in the news. The globalists are real. It's a well-established fact at this point. And the Illuminati, and what I'm referring to tonight, this is where it's going to go very far off the deep end. I know, David, you and I have talked about this before. Talking about the Illuminati bloodlines.
Okay, yeah.
Yep, remember talking about that?
Mm-hmm. Yes, very much so.
So the theory is that in the Illuminati and all the people that run the world, there is a special bloodline through their heritage and their ancestors, and they like to keep things close-knit in the family to try to keep the line pure-blooded, quote. So, because rumor has it, at some point there were some entities that had at one point bred with humans, powerful humans, which ended up becoming the Illuminati, and that if I remember correctly from what you and I talked about, like, there's a bunch of different versions of the creature that they refer to depending on which flavor of it you pick. There's one that says that the bloodline was this way so the entities could manifest themselves in these people. There's other ones saying that they're reptile aliens, that they're not actually people. Here's one. Someone's talking about the Illuminati being Nephilim, being the crossbreed of either aliens and humans, or angels and demons or humans with humans. So that's one they're saying. And then there's another one talking about them being the remainders of a missing civilization from Antarctica. There's all sorts of stuff. And then here's one talking about them being supposedly the Illuminati being the Anunnaki from Mesopotamia.
Oh, okay. That one I'm not familiar with. That one I hadn't heard before.
Yeah, there's a bunch of them. So tonight I'm not so much going to focus on one in particular. I'm going to talk about a lot of the different ones because they all fall into that same group, just different flavors.
Yeah.
Like this one says, if I'm getting all sorts of pop-ups. Here we go. Anunnaki alien reptilian Illuminati training for elite Nibiru blood agents is what the name of this article.
Great, I love it.
It says, How to Take Over the World Part 3. Anunnaki alien reptilian Illuminati training for elite Nibiru blood agents. It says, this is for educational entertainment purposes only and should not be abused. In fact, don't even watch this video. That's funny. So, okay. Well, I was going to continue to read the article, but apparently they want you to watch the video because the article is just a bunch of names and stuff labeled off and tags. But so that's pretty interesting that they think that. I'll post that for anybody that's interested in looking into that if I don't find more on it here tonight. So back to the one where we talked about where supposedly these interdimensional beings bred with these people so they could cross over, and the theory that we talked about with that is that the reason why they do that is because these interdimensional beings, aliens, whatever you want to call them, wanted to be able to control Earth and control humanity to keep us in a state where we can't do anything about them trying to run us.
Yeah, they're trying to turn this world into their world, and that they work on a low vibration. They like misery and pain, and that's why our world is the mess that it is, and it's why they control the leaders in the bloodlines that you're talking about, so that they can have the power, so that they're in the positions of power to be able to control those people. Yeah.
Like I said, though, you would be hard-pressed to find any solid evidence on any of this, because it's hard. I mean, you'd be hard-pressed to find any solid evidence of the Illuminati themselves. I'm sure it's out there. It's probably all buried under stuff. And everything on the internet that's considerably important in terms of conspiracy theories gets buried hardcore. So, but good.
Do you consider though, like things like the supposedly like secret organizations like Skull and Bones and like the Masons and those type of groups all part of the Illuminati?
I think they're all separate entities, but I think they're all part of a large group of people trying to run the world. Like I don't think they're all in the same group or on the same page, but yet they're all trying to achieve running the world, I believe.
Different factions. Yeah,
different factions, for example, or they may work together sometimes, they might not. I'm sure it would be like, I imagine if, like, for example, some countries have their own leaders and they're very much run specifically by those leaders, and then you have groups like the Catholic Church even as a world power going against other groups. So there's different factions and everything. Different people want power. Everybody's power hungry when it comes down to it at the end of the day. Well, not everybody, but when it comes to these people trying to run the world.
Yeah.
But
that's for sure.
We all know that they talk about the dollars, the dollar bill and the all-seeing eye and all that stuff. I forget there's something else that they're supposed to be hidden in the dollar to reference it. It's the all-seeing eye, the pyramid.
There's an owl. that is hidden in the dollar, which is supposed to be representative of Moloch, which was an entity that they worshipped
Gotcha.
back in time, and also supposedly is it's not supposedly, at Bohemian Grove in California, there is a giant stone owl that is there that they do a ceremony in front of every year. And you can elaborate more on what Bohemian Grove is and that.
Yeah. Bohemian Grove is a place that's been documented where these different powerful people and the different groups of people all have access to Bohemian Grove. It's a very exclusive, invite-only place. And what they do is they go there and they perform rituals and stuff. And there's some really, really dark stuff associated with that I've seen out there over the years. Like, there was this one video I watched where there was this guy. He ended up being arrested for pedophilia. And they talked to him about it. And he basically said that's all he's ever known. That's how he grew up, is he was treated that way. And he saw a bunch of stuff. And he had told the investigators this whole story, why he did it. And that's just how it was. And he basically said, if you go and find these journals that I have hidden in these different locations over the years, you'll see that I'm telling you the truth. And he had stated that he was a victim of Bohemian Grove as a boy, when he was a little boy.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yep. I'll have to see if I can find that video tonight, but I didn't look it up because I remember what it said. It was very it was very intense. But so they have that, and he was saying that he was a victim of it, and there was other boys there that were a victim of it too. And they said that he and his friend were forced to rape another boy.
Oh, wow.
Yep. And then he states, so this gets really graphic. I apologize if anybody listening to this gets very sensitive about these kinds of things. I'll give you a disclaimer right now. It's going to get worse here in a moment. And if you don't want to listen to that, you can either skip ahead a little bit or stop listening, because I have to talk about it to put across exactly the kind of place Bohemian Grove is said to be and what kind of darkness there is there. So, with saying that, I'm going to go ahead and go with it. He has stated that they made him and his friend rape this little boy that was younger than them. They were, I don't know, I can't remember, they were under 14 years of age. And this was just a little boy. Like, I think they said it was like somewhere, I can't remember if it was a 5 or 6-year-old little boy that they had to do this to.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so what ended up happening is he said that they made them do that, and then the men there all took their turn with this boy. And that he was bleeding and all over the place, all this crazy stuff. And they said that they were dragging him around the floor, like out in the woods. They were just dragging him around like by his ankles and stuff, and he was getting all beat up and everything. It's really disgusting. Makes me sick thinking about it, but
that just makes my skin crawl.
Makes you angry, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And what people need to understand is that Bohemian Grove is this is where world leaders go, presidents, very influential people in like Hollywood and movie stars, and just look it up and you get the list of names of people that have been there.
And so like I said, I'm saying this because if we're talking about Bohemian Grove, it needs to be said, because it's not, I don't know, people like to sweep all this stuff under the rug and pretend like it doesn't happen, or like, oh, that's just conspiracy. But a lot of this stuff is dark and people need to know about it. They just they don't want to hear the truth a lot of the time, is what it is.
Yeah.
But
well, there was a huge male prostitution ring was supposedly busted going in and out of Bohemian Grove one year. Like,
I believe it.
They actually talked to some of the male prostitutes, and that took place there. It's just crazy.
Yep. And then the other thing that they had said too is at one point they ended up killing the little boy, and they shot him supposedly they shot the boy in the head. And then so these boys that were forced to do stuff before I get to the next part, so it makes more sense. That guy that said he was forced to do this as a kid, him and his friend were in a cage, locked in a cage, out in the middle of all of this. And basically, after they killed this little boy, they made those two boys do stuff to the body with the boy after he was dead. Yep. And
that's just sick.
Yep. And I can't remember what happened to his friend, but he ended up surviving. He ended up becoming an adult. He survived all of this. And he was telling these investigators that this is what happened. He told them the story about it. He said, you can go find my journals. They didn't believe it. They're like, this is so crazy. There's no way. This guy's just making up anything he can to try not to get in trouble. He knew he was going to get in trouble regardless, and he said he was sorry, and he was crying and everything. That's just the life that he knew. That's what he was made to be. And it doesn't excuse it. It doesn't excuse it. But it's like monsters trying to make monsters, essentially. And
yeah.
He so the investigators didn't believe it. Well, you know what? The investigators went and found these journals. They actually found these journals that this guy had said, and there was a lot of them. And they even went back and dated the journals. So they did this test on the journal, and the way they did it is they checked the journals and they dated the inks of the journals, and they were able to go back and trace that these were legitimately written at the time that this guy, like, it would have fit the time frame that this guy said he was writing them, and it would have progressed through the ages. Because what it is, they went back and they found the ink that was written on these journals. It was all different pens were used for all of it, and all of these pens actually correlated to the time. These pens were being produced at these different times that this journal was written, so they were able to time frame it and find that it's true, at least that these journals were written over the years and not recently, or like as a forethought. You know what I mean? They were actually documented to have been written over the course of years throughout this guy's life.
And what exactly was in the journals?
He wrote everything. His experiences, different people he encountered, how terrible of a person he felt like, and he wrote down everything that he was made to do, everything. They found all of it.
Oh, okay. So were there names of like people in these journals?
They didn't come out and say any names, but they were implying heavily that there were names, or at least fake names that he knew them as.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean? So there were names in there.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't go into a lot of detail. I'm sure you wouldn't want to start spewing names in association with a journal like that. But
yeah.
So that was the part. That was Bohemian Grove. We got a little off topic. Oh no, we're on topic. So we're talking about the Illuminati and the globalists and all that stuff. But so that's the most horrific thing I found about Bohemian Grove over the years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I remember
and
watching
this is all
that.
part of the Illuminati.
I don't know if it's Illuminati themselves, but anything like the Illuminati, all these different groups, whoever's associated with Bohemian Grove, it's who it is. I don't know. Are they Yeah. But
I think they're under that thing. Yeah, I think they are under like considered part of that, the Illuminati, same as the Bilderberg too.
Yep. And talking about the different, I was talking about the different creatures and stuff, and how they worship these creatures, and supposedly these creatures are the ones that cross the bloodline. Along those lines, even in Hollywood, the Hollywood elites, they are made to sell their soul to the devil and all this other stuff, and they're made to do these rituals. And there's been people that came out of Hollywood talking about how all these powerful people that are running things will make them do ridiculous things so they then get them. Like Alex Jones from InfoWars talks about it all the time too. Well, at least I don't know if he does currently, but he was for a while. How what they'll do is they'll catch you sleeping with, like, what they'll do is they'll set you up where, like, a man will go and he'll sleep with a woman, but then they bring a woman to him to be with, but then it ends up turning out that the woman was underage and they used it to blackmail the guy. Stuff like that happens all the time. Or they'll drug you, and next thing you know, you're waking up next to some woman and they have pictures of a child, and they have pictures of you next to a child, and you're both naked because they drugged you and took your clothes off. next to a child. Like, they do all sorts of stuff, and they do it to control you. And what they'll do too is they'll get you to do all these heinous acts, so then you can't leave, because if you leave, they have all that information on you, and it'll be out in public. And one of my favorite singers and songwriters, Ronnie Radke from the band Falling in Reverse, he came out and said that they tell you that they make you sell your soul to the devil. They get you on drugs. They control you, and it's a really bad thing. And I guess they smeared him. He claims that they smeared his name in the mud, and that they had got him convicted of something that he didn't do, because he decided he didn't want to be a part of it anymore. He didn't want to be a part of the whole Hollywood elite. Like, he didn't come out and ever say anything crazy like about children or anything like that. He just said that they very much get you drugged up, doing normal illegal things like drugs and pretty much drugs, I guess, in his case at least. He didn't say anything else about anything else, but they got him convicted of murder, but he only served a couple years because they didn't have any like real proof that he had actually done it. I guess they didn't have enough proof to get him committed for actual murder. I forget how. There was some lesser degree of murder or something, supposedly, because they were in a fight. There was a big fight between a bunch of people, and someone ended up dying. They blamed it on him.
Okay. But there wasn't enough evidence to convict him. Do you think that...
well, he got convicted, but not full murder, because he would have been in there a lot longer than 2 years or 3 years.
Do you think this was kind of like a shot over the bow at him from the Illuminati to say, you better watch what you're doing or we're really going to get you?
Well, I would imagine so, considering he's hated by all of Hollywood, and he's still one of the most successful songwriters. Okay, people don't think they're successful because you don't hear about them all the time. That's because they're not publicized as much as all the other bands are. For a band that's not publicized as much as all these big singers and stuff, they're doing really good. And in a lot of his songs, he talks about how Earth is a prison cell, people are running everything, wake up, we all need to wake up. And he says all sorts of things. He has a bunch of songs talking about conspiracy theories in his songs. And he's saying that what is it? I forget what song it is. He says, the world is a prison cell, they're running everything, we need to wake up. You need to open your eyes, you need to see, basically, is what he's saying in that song.
Yeah.
And that there's the other songs where he did some rap songs too, where he was talking about it, and he said that they made him. He's talking about the elites, and when he first got into it, he said they make you get on your knees and they make you do all this stuff, and then he talks about, this is what you made me. It's just, there's a lot to it. It's very, very deep, and I would definitely recommend it. If you guys can tolerate some rock music or some rock, metal, pop, or whatever. It depends on the day that when Ronnie makes a song. It depends on what the genre is. But he talks about that a lot too, and I think the world would benefit a lot if he came out and sat down with someone like Alex Jones or someone else that could sit there and reach a larger audience and listen to his story.
Yeah, he's got to be careful. I mean, the more he talks, the better it is, but you better watch. You could end up, dead one morning from a drug overdose. You know how that goes. Yeah,
well, if he dies from a drug overdose, everybody that follows Ronnie knows who was murdered, because he has 100% quit drugs. He quit drinking. He quit doing everything because he had a kid, and him being in prison changed things for him. He didn't want to ever go back, and he tried helping some of his old bandmates that were still very heavily in drugs. He tried to help them. He offered out his hand to have them come out, and how he would help them get out of it. And he tried helping a couple of them and all this other stuff. But it just shows that, because you were talking about conspiracies with bands earlier, but I'm getting a little off topic again. But it all has to do with the Hollywood elites. A lot of them are just in the pecking order of the globalists and the Illuminati and all that stuff. And the reason I brought up the Hollywood stuff is because these people are made to sell their souls to the devils. At least that's what they're told they're doing. And there's just so much to all of this. There's so much occult stuff within the people that are running everything from the shadows. So much occult. It's great. Like they do, was it spirit cooking? We remember hearing about that back around election time. Well, probably not everybody, but
I remember hearing about that. What is that again? Spirit cooking?
If I remember correctly, it's where they all meet up, and it's a combination of where it's supposed to be. In the one case that we actually heard about, they may not have been the exact same thing, but what it's supposed to be is it's supposed to be like a sacrificial ritual of blood and semen and all this other stuff, and they're supposed to, if I remember correctly, during the spirit cooking, it's supposed to be the blood of a sacrificed person or child and all stuff, and it's basically like an offering to some deity or entity it's an occult ritual to bring power to themselves. Is what it's supposed to be, to make them powerful. And it was said that a lot of political people. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to say that because I'm sure we have people from all political parties that listen, so I'm going to leave that one out. I was going to say something about a specific party, but I think I'll leave it out just to play it safe. Might get some unsubscribed people.
Yeah, that's fine.
But anyways, there was a lot of politicians that were said to take place in this over the last couple of years. And they say that there's some politicians that are more involved with the Illuminati stuff, but they said that most politicians are just a pawn of these big groups that are said to have alien or separate, like different entity blood in their veins. It's all this stuff, but
the power brokers behind the scenes who are blackmailing the politicians and the movie stars in order to control them to influence society in the way that they want it to go.
Yep, and they say that a lot of the reason why the president gets as much hate as he does and why so many people they're putting out so much misinformation about him is because, yes, I will say that President Trump is a globalist in terms of being... No, he's an elite. I'll say he's an elite. Not in terms of being a bad person or anything, but in terms of being one of those people that likes to have power, but not in a bad way. I'm walking some fine lines here, trying to say this correctly. But even though, yes, people say, oh, well, he just makes all this money and stuff. Well, he is one of the few people that is standing up for our country, that has money, and he's always surrounded himself with people, the blue-collar jobs, people that aren't as fortunate as him. He's always helping people. He's always been helping people. And the reason why I bring this up is there are people in the whole power order, like the whole power structure of all of this, there are groups within these power structures that may not necessarily be for us, but they have our intentions in mind because they don't want the really crazy people to go and blow everything up and kill everybody. You know what I mean? Like, there's...
Do you think that, like, a conspiracy or whatever is going on, that, like, the reason they're going after, let's say, Trump, whether you like Trump or hate Trump, it doesn't matter, whether that they're going after him because he won't play ball in that way?
I believe that's why. I believe that's why I brought it up too, is he does not completely do everything that they want him to do. He's already... Well, I just heard something... I saw a video a week or two ago talking about that. He's going after the Fed now. The Federal Reserve. Mm-hmm. And the last time the president did that, they ended up shot.
Yeah.
So, I hope he's careful. I don't...
Yeah. I mean, we don't need to get into the whole thing about Trump and all that and everything, but I do see what you're saying about that. You know, if they're not controlling him, you know, the power brokers that are behind the scenes within the cabal of the Illuminati are not controlling Trump, then it would make sense as to why
Correct.
all of this is going on with so much negativity being put at him.
Correct. Yep. I just bring that up because we're talking about the Illuminati and the government officials, and the Illuminati and all the different power brokers all very much have their hands deeply in our government and all the other governments too. Unless of course you want to get into more conspiracies about Russia and Putin and how he supposedly used the globalists to get power and then kick them out of the country.
He might have. Who knows?
That's a thing I heard too.
Yeah. I mean, people don't want to believe that like there are, large corporations and, power brokers behind the scenes that are, controlling our government or having our government do things. But all you have to do is look at the past of what's taken place. I mean, you can look into All American Fruit Company, Chiquita Banana. They actually had the CIA overthrow a government for them so that they could control the growth of the banana fields where this was in South America. They actually had a government overthrown using the CIA so that they could take control of the production down there and everything, because someone else came into the power that didn't want them there. This is not made up. This is not a conspiracy. This is real. That is absolute truth. You can look it up. So yeah, crazy things like that happen all the time. Corporations control politicians from behind the scenes, like you said, with blackmail, drugs, all sorts of different things.
And it all feeds back into. So let's just go back to the theory that all of those entities are wanting to feed off of us and keep us in a state where, like, we're putting off negative energy, like we're all negative. They want us to live in a bad state. Mm-hmm. That would just trickle on down, and that would explain a lot of stuff.
Oh yeah. They want to keep this, like I said before, they want to keep this world in the low vibration of what their world is, and they feed off the negative energy, and that's why we have all these wars and killings and murder.
I think it's more than that. Our world
isn't such a mess. But it's partly that,
Yeah,
and the other thing is that, when if you're being controlled by one of these beings, and you can make billions of dollars doing what they want, then you're probably gonna go. Then there are people that are gonna go along with that because they want the power and they want to be, money.
Yep.
Unfortunately, that's what it comes down to: power and money for a lot of this.
Yep. That's what the world runs on for the most part, and I don't think that's the way it should be, but that's just the way it is.
The next one here that I want to talk about is this is something that took place from 1964 to 1973. CIA project called MK Ultra. And those of you who don't know what MK Ultra was, supposedly, is the CIA mind control project, and MK Ultra was the code name. And they conducted these experiments from 1964 to 1973. And it consisted of using LSD, hypnotism, trauma-based things against people, all in a concerted effort to see if they could control people with their mind, get people under their control, kind of like a Manchurian Candidate, if you're familiar with what that is. So what happened is they started doing these experiments, and this stems back to our favorite conspiracy people, the Nazis, and Project Paperclip. When they brought Nazis over after the war during Project Paperclip, some of the scientists had done this type of work, and they had done it on people that were in internment camps and stuff like that. And so this continued. Like I said, they did all these experiments, and supposedly the project ended in 1973. Now, MK Ultra was a real thing that took place. These documents have been released over the years through information of what do you call it? Through the Freedom of Information Act. These papers have come out and proved that this was a CIA program. And the conspiracy today is that the program never ended. That by 1973, they figured it out. All the experiments and everything they had done, that they had perfected it. And that they can do mind control on someone. And how they do it is they'll do it with trauma. So what they'll do is they'll traumatize someone through hypnosis, using drugs, bright lights, all sorts of things that shock your mind. And what they want to do is, when they're putting you through this program, they want to fracture your mind. Okay, so they want to they want you to disassociate from reality, from your conscious mind into your subconscious mind. So they do this by traumatizing you.
It sounds kind of, I'll be careful how I say this, but it sounds kind of similar to the concept of how they break you down and build you up for boot camp.
Yeah, it's the same type of similar mentality. In the military, when you go to boot camp and that type of thing, it's not obviously as severe as this would be. But
yeah, it's different.
They break you down and then build you back up. It's different, but similar type of things. But what they do with this is that the younger they can get somebody, the better. Okay. Mm-hmm. And not everyone can be, this can be done to. You have to be certain type of personality, susceptible to these type of things.
Okay, so it doesn't work on everybody then. That's good.
No, it doesn't work on everyone. But when they do this, like I said, they want to get you when you're young. And what they do is they'll traumatize you, okay? They'll severely traumatize you. And they do this through things like rape, having you kill someone, repeatedly subjecting you to horrifying images and everything like that. Yeah. What happens when they get a subject young is the first few years of the child, if they start with a child, this is how they do it. They'll start by lavishing the child with anything the child wants, okay? So they'll get lots of love, they'll, toys, everything. And this is all done through one specific person. This person's called the handler.
Yep.
And then they get to a certain point, let's say around 5 years old, where the child is taken away and put into a traumatic situation, where now the child will be traumatized. Okay, they're going to be put into satanic rituals. They're going to be raped. They're going to have to, like you said, kill somebody, all these type of things. And then the handler will show up. Now, in the child's mind, this is the person that was taking care of me, loved me, protected me. They think their salvation is here. Okay.
It's they kind of have you saying that. Sorry to interrupt, but
no, go right ahead.
You saying that, it's interesting. I watched Stranger Things, and the one girl there that the government in that show is working with that has different abilities. There's this one guy that she refers to as Papa the whole time. And everyone else is mean to her and abuses her and all this stuff. And he will go in and he'll talk to her. Like, he'll be disappointed in her and stuff. It's like he's pretending they got her as a baby and he is pretending to be her father.
Yeah, what happens
and is convincing her to do stuff that she doesn't want to do.
Yeah, what happens is when they disassociate, a lot of times the victim will actually see the person that is victimizing them as a parent figure.
Yep.
That actually happened with Joseph Mengele when he was doing his experiments in the camps with the prisoners in World War II, the Nazi psychologist. A lot of those people, even after he had abused them so much, even though through the rest of their lives they went to see psychologists stuff, and they still saw him as a father figure and someone that they still had like emotional love feelings for. It's weird, but the mind works in really fucked up ways when people get abused.
Yeah.
And stuff. And so what happens is they then send in the handler, and the child thinks that, you know, this is going to be their salvation. And the handler now, instead of giving the child love, abuses the child.
As a breaking point?
Ways. And what happens is the child's mind can't comprehend these two different things. One thing being all this love, and this other thing now being all this abuse, so different from each other. And what happens is that the child disassociates. Their mind fractures, which is what they want, and their conscious mind says, I can't handle this, and regresses away. And what happens is it opens up the subconscious now to be programmed. Mm-hmm. And what they do is they program the mind different personalities. Okay, so you'll have the main personality, which is the one that is for everyone to see, and then behind that are all these other different personalities they program in. And a lot of, now this falls back to what you were talking about with the Illuminati and with these bloodline families, that a lot of the Illuminati are supposedly involved in this type of mind control programs through secret societies, through bloodlines. In some of these bloodline families, they actually want this trait within their children because they feel it's a benefit for their kids to
be
have.
Programmed.
Yes, to be able to be programmed and to be able to have these different abilities, because supposedly what can happen is you can take someone and you can turn them into a superhuman computer in one of their personalities by programming it correctly. And
just to access the brain power that's already there that most of us don't access on a regular basis.
Yeah, and what they do is they'll hypnotize the person and they'll use trigger words. So let's say the trigger word for a certain personality is Rumpelstiltskin. Okay, so the handler will then call the person on the phone, or they'll see them and they'll say Rumpelstiltskin. This now triggers the program and brings that personality out. And whatever that person has been programmed for, that person will do. And there's actually been some whistleblowers on this who have come out and said that this is going on. There have been some whistleblowers who actually were part of the program. This one woman, what happened is her father in the early 80s got caught selling pictures of her, child pornography of her, naked photographs of her. Her father did this. And he was going to go to prison, the whole thing. And they came to him and said, look, we won't send you to jail. We won't prosecute. You'll be set free. But what we want is we want your daughter to be enrolled in this program. So for him, it was a win-win situation. He's like, sure, go ahead. He signs the papers, and they take his daughter into the program. And she was used as a carrier for top secret messages. So she would be given under a different one of the other personalities. She would be given all this information that was memorized. Then she would be turned back to herself. Okay,
and made to meet someone.
Or turned into another personality, sent to meet someone. That person that she would meet would know the trigger word, turn to the other personality, and then she would divulge all the information. So if she was ever captured or somebody got a hold of her, there's no way they could ever get the information because she doesn't even know that it exists.
Unless they knew the trigger word.
Yeah, unless they know the trigger word. And a lot of these people who are in this program don't even know that they're in the program.
Yep.
And supposedly that a lot of Hollywood stars are in this program and don't even know it. And the program today is called Project Monarch, after the monarch butterfly. And that has to do with the genetic memory that can be passed from monarch butterflies. And
that's interesting.
that you can pass this genetic trait on to your children. And that's what a lot of these old families wanted. They wanted this trait passed into their kids.
People
in the
that were
60s,
easily trainable and breakable.
Yeah, because it's been passed down genetically in the family.
Yeah,
That
like
if
lack
you
of
were
willpower,
traumatized,
lack of mind, or something.
yeah, well, if you were traumatized as a child, supposedly if you were traumatized and beaten, that genetic and you disassociate, that disassociation trait can be passed down to your kids genetically.
So it's something that might not happen to you, but it becomes a physical trait that you can pass on.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And what's the thing is in the 60s, they were giving people LSD without their knowledge when they were first starting the program through different colleges. There was one person who was doused with LSD for 75 days without their knowledge.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah. So, that's the things they did in the past that we know about. So what's happening today? I mean, supposedly Roseanne Barr came out in an interview and said MK Ultra runs rampant through Hollywood. MK Ultra mind control runs rampant through Hollywood. And you wonder why some people actually supposedly, I guess, like military people, is said that they'll actually sell their kids into the program because they think they're doing their patriotic duty, that they're told that this is gonna help the country, that you'll also be given, better rank, you'll move up, your kid will become a super soldier, or they'll be doing this, all sorts of things they're told. And some people are just like, yes, this is a great thing. My kid will be super smart. They could become a movie star, whatever they want them to become.
They could do a lot of other stuff you don't know about too.
Yeah, and supposedly a lot of these people that are in this program become very much associated, obsessed with butterflies, because in the programming, they are told they're a monarch. And so it's in their subconscious. They don't realize it, but they become obsessed with the butterfly, the monarch butterfly. And once you know that, if you start looking at Hollywood, you'll see butterfly references everywhere with stars.
It's interesting.
Like butterfly tattoos, they'll have butterflies this, butterfly. It's just craziness.
I actually knew somebody in high school who was super obsessed with monarch butterflies. That's interesting. I'm not saying that's related, but...
Well, the thing is that they take people from all walks of life. Okay? Anyone could be put in this program. You wouldn't know it. What they look for is they look for a high intelligence, so at least an IQ of 120. Okay? But you also need to be very creative and have a very active imagination.
Mm-hmm. And
then you need to be upset to be able to be programmed. If they're not going to try, they do tests on kids. If they're getting a kid, if they're getting an older adult, they'll do tests, but if they're not going to waste their time on a mind that they can't disassociate and fracture, they won't bother. They know what to look for, for this type of thing. Supposedly, it's going to sound weird, but supposedly Disney is a big part of this.
Mm-hmm.
And they use certain Disney movies in the programming. They also, The Wizard of Oz is one of the big movies they use, because what they do is in the programming, the movie is used as a place for the conscious mind, the mind that everyone knows, that people see, for a place for them to go and protect themselves when the other stuff is coming out.
I see exactly what you mean, because Dorothy supposedly dreamt all of that.
Mm-hmm, exactly. And there's two places. One place is reality, where you see all the people in her life, and then the other place is this fantasy world where everyone takes on these other types of beings. Mm-hmm. And they do this for lots of different reasons. Like I said, one for spies, one's a super soldier. Supposedly, a lot of Hollywood starlets are used as sex slaves.
Yep.
And they don't even know it. that they end up getting programmed, and people pay huge amount of money to sleep with a beautiful starlet, and they don't even know that they've been programmed into what they call a beta, which is the term they use for the sex slave.
Yeah, well, some of them know that they're in that. They just think it's the way life is, too.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there's a
the
difference
other
between ones that
is,
don't know and ones that have just accepted it.
Yeah, well, it's interesting now when you talked about that guy at Bohemian Grove, and he thought that's just how life was and what they were made to do as kids and stuff.
That would be part of the breaking.
He was being put into this program. It would be
Yeah.
part of the stuff of traumatizing them as they were children,
Well,
in order to fracture their minds to make this happen.
It's a good possibility because he also talked about in there that how he would then be a courier for people and all this other stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
He would do tasks that these people would ask of him.
Yeah.
And the only reason why he finally came out and said something is because he was going to prison, and he was going to prison at this point.
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, what else do I have to lose? I don't have anybody." So he just told the truth.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and supposedly what happens is that, like I said, Disney's involved in this, and supposedly a lot of the Disney kids that are on the shows and stuff are programmed, and that's why you see a lot of these Hollywood, they become these Hollywood stars then, and around the age of 28 to 30. Because the body goes through hormonal changes, the programming breaks down, and that's why you see a lot of these so-called child stars at that age, seem to go crazy out of nowhere all of a sudden. It's because the programming is breaking down, and they have to go back in for more programming, but they go back in under the disguise of rehab.
Yep, okay. Or psychology.
Yeah, exactly. And what's happening is they're actually going back in and getting reprogrammed. And there are certain, I'm going to put the video in the thing about this. It's explained a lot better than I can talk about it. But these trigger words you see on certain people. There's one with, there's a video with Al Roker where they're talking about he's talking to two other his co-hosts, and the one lady says, "Well, we gotta make sure that we leave room for the Holy Ghost." And Al Roker just gets this weird look on his face and stares at the camera and doesn't move. They're still talking and going on about what they're doing, but he just, as soon as she said that word, he just stares at the camera and just stands there and stares. Doesn't blink, doesn't move, nothing for like 5 minutes.
Wow.
Just freezes up. And part of what people think is, well, maybe that was like a trigger word for him, and it sent him into a thing. Other talk show hosts, there's one, I don't know her name, but she was on the show. She's an African-American woman. She was doing her show, and she's wearing a costume. It was for Halloween, and she's wearing the Statue of Liberty outfit. And she's talking and doing her show and everything, and then all of a sudden, she just kind of like gets this look on her face. Her eyes just go wide, like something's coming at her. She goes back and forth and just falls over and passes out. And everybody's like, well, what the heck just happened? And then she comes back and says, oh, it was from heat exhaustion from the costume I was wearing. But she's still wearing the costume.
Yeah.
Why didn't you take the costume off then if it was heat exhaustion? And you don't come back from heat exhaustion that quickly. But like when you see her eyes, like all of a sudden her eyes just open up like something's coming at. So something might have triggered it. Something triggered off the programming.
David,
so it's just really crazy stuff.
All I can say is I'm glad I hate butterflies and moths. I don't hate butterflies, they just creep me out. Like I don't like for whatever reason, since I was a little kid, I don't like moths. And butterflies are too much like moths for me to enjoy butterflies.
Yes, that's a good thing.
So
I'll put this information up in the Discord for people to read about. more about the original MK Ultra program and the Monarch program that is supposedly still going on today, and it just kind of blows your mind, man, when you start getting into it. It's like, oh god, it's crazy. When you look at what the government's done in the past, it wouldn't surprise me.
You know, now that you tell me that, this is a little off topic. I'll just throw it in here real quick though. Well, I mean, it is not off topic, but it is. Remember my personal experience I was telling you about with those people in episode 1?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Some of the tactics that you were talking about sounds like some of the stuff that they were trying to do.
Possible.
Like build me up, trying to build me up and break me down and all this other stuff.
I mean, there's a lot of different organizations that are supposedly using this now, from large corporations to secret societies.
I would refer to that
using this programming.
Yeah.
So
I would refer to it as cult tactics in certain situations, but that's very much what it was like. And I was just thinking about it, and that's very much what they were trying to do. That's probably why they got super mad all of a sudden when I said, you know what, screw it, I'm gone, bye, and that was it. And I just completely was like, nope, I'm not taking this. And that would... I have a tendency to... Well, I guess it's probably a good thing now that I think about it. I have a tendency to be able to pack up my stuff and leave if stuff starts getting crazy like that. So that's probably a good thing. And I don't like butterflies.
All right, well, let's move on from that.
Let's move on to the next one. Very interesting. Thank you, David. That was pretty good.
Yeah.
All right.
What do you got?
So the last one that I have... That was... Are we on? No, not my last one. Sorry, I have 2 more. I'll just try to keep this short. I'll talk about one that we'll probably talk about for less time before we talk about the longer one. Just to gauge the time.
I was trying to keep that one short, but it's kind of hard.
Yeah, that's why I said it's fine. I'll just keep this one. We can probably keep short. So we've all heard about flat Earth, right? And they talk about flat earthers and all this stuff. And well, you know, did you know that there's several different theories within flat Earth? Like different variations of it?
No, I didn't.
Like
I thought it was kind of all the same.
Well, there's the normal flat Earth, that's the mainstream that everybody talks about, where we're a round disk with Antarctica surrounding us as giant ice walls and there's a dome over us. That's the typical flat Earth that everybody thinks about. And when someone says, flat earther, that's what they're referring to, for the most part, is that theory. And then there's a theory that similar to that one, but we're in a ring of ice and there's a dome over us, but that dome is much, much larger than it needs to be if it was just for us. And past those walls, there's more world. There's more islands and different civilizations and things. But that's not the one we're talking about either, but that's leading up to it. The version of flat Earth that we're talking about tonight is the belief that the Earth is flat, and the reason why the Earth is flat is because it's not an Earth at all, and we live on a plane of Earth, like a realm. It's a plane. It's a physical world, and that the Earth is flat because it expands out infinitely, and that there's other sections of the Earth that we don't have access to because it keeps going infinitely forever, and the firmament above us, or the dome, isn't a dome. It's another layer to the realm above us. It's the floor of the realm above us. And so that's the theory that we're talking about for flat Earth tonight. And I'll read this post that somebody made. It says, "Round Earthers are not welcomed. I recognize you as Round Earther. I recognize you as Round Earther. I won't continue reading your comment, and I hope the moderator will comply and delete your messages." A little harsh, not really open for free speech, but they're talking about it. They said, "The Earth is flat. It's expanding horizontally to infinite, and right now it's expanding at an amazing velocity we can't imagine. Above us, endless number of other flat planes that expand. Below us, endless numbers of other flat planes that expand infinitely. The firmament is our ceiling and the floor of the upper flat plane." It says, then they go on to say, which this is just a bunch of, if you're talking about flat Earth, there's a lot of things that we in general know to be true to us at least, that can't be true in a flat Earth. And this one says, the moon is a hologram, a hoax from the start of this plane, and living creatures, including humanity, something like 400 years ago, supposedly is when this started. Like the whole hoax of the Earth isn't flat.
Yeah.
It says, the sun circles around us. The sun is like lava, but has boundaries and pushed by the water in the sky. Okay, I don't know what they mean by that, but basically, to my understanding of that is they talk about on many flat Earth models that the moon and the sun aren't out in outer space apart from the planet. They are up in the sky very high up, and imagine they're light bulbs essentially that put off heat. One's the light for the night, and the other one's a light for the day. And the light for the day, it's basically, imagine a giant grow light, like a source of energy and heat that helps us survive and helps plants grow and everything. So it's like a gardener going out and putting grow lights in their garden so that the organisms and the plants can thrive when it's cold out, essentially. And there's the moon, and they're both said to circle above us and go around in a big circle instead. So the way north, south, east, west would work on a compass is the center of the circle, or flat plane, that which we are at, the magnetic pole, is north. And then on that model, no matter where you go within that circle, that would be the North Pole.
Okay.
Like, for example, imagine a plate. You have a strong magnet in the center of the plate, and then you take a compass and you put the compass around and follow it and watch the arrow move. It's always going to point towards that thing in the center because that's the North Pole. Does that make sense?
Yes.
That's how they describe how a compass works and how you can circumnavigate the world, because if you're following a compass straight west or straight east, you're going to go all the way around in the circle because the north is always going to point in the center.
Got you. Okay.
So that's how that works. And I'm assuming that's what they mean by the lights of the sun being like not an actual sun, and it's more like a light. And then it says, so the idea with this is we live in a bunch of different realms, and the Earth goes on infinitely, and we're only in one section of it. And we're being kept from the knowledge that the world expands infinitely and that there's other places out there that we could go to.
Oh, okay. What is the purpose of keeping it from us? Did they say?
It's a power thing. There's so many different flat Earth conspiracies that all mesh together on certain points, and what I believe, let's just say it were true. If it were true that we live on a flat Earth and it expands infinitely, and we're contained within a circle, and that it's kept secret from us by all the governments of the world, like it's a secret and they keep it from us. My belief on that would be, if that's the case, it would be because the governments of the world in our section have to communicate and work politically with the governments of the other sections, or the beings in the other sections.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Kind of like the Hunger Games.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Mm-hmm.
Yep. So they would keep it from us, because if we found out that there was more places to go visit, what's going to stop lots of people from trying to go besides force?
Yeah, exactly.
It'd be like
to see what's going on.
It would be like being in a fishbowl, being a fish in a fishbowl, and then having it set down into the ocean and realizing that you could get out into the larger ocean, or into a larger body of water. That little dome that you thought was all of existence isn't all of existence. But that's the theory behind that. There's a lot, but I thought it was pretty interesting. Figured bring it up.
So are they saying that it expands outward from us, or is it like layered, like when you stack plates on each other?
Oh, no, what they're saying is, imagine the table is the plane, and you put plates all over that table. You completely cover the table in plates going in different directions.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, that kind of falls into the idea of the multiverse.
Yep.
And the different dimensions, and then the multiverse where there's all these different. Well, our world has many multiple. Everything you do is done, but just a little differently.
Well,
stuff like that.
It's interesting too that one of the things that people use to also use as a confirmation for flat Earth is if you go through and you look at all the UN logos, there's no Antarctica.
Oh, really? I never noticed that before.
Yep, Antarctica is not on the map of the UN, like the UN logo. Like, I'll send you a picture real quick. Let's see, open image. But yeah, so essentially, every single variation of the UN's logo does not have Antarctica in the center of it at all. So let me.
And their reasoning for this, the flat Earth people, the reason that it's not on there is
doesn't exist
because it doesn't exist. Okay.
I sent you a picture. So basically, the outside ring would be the South Pole, and Antarctica would be the North Pole.
Gotcha. Okay.
Because you're not. The government. A lot of people say that the government doesn't. There's certain places when you get so close to the Antarctica and you get so close to the South Pole, the government comes up and turns you away. Is what
I've heard that. I've heard that there's places they won't allow you to go. There's a lot of different conspiracies as to why.
Yep. And the flat Earth theory says that the reason why they do that is because Antarctica doesn't exist in the way people thinks it does.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Based off of a lot of the UN maps and everything.
Okay.
And that the UN map is a flat Earth map with no Antarctica.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting.
All right. Well, that's pretty much all I had to say. What do you think of the whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it's not out of the realm of possibilities, especially when you look at science. They're talking about, multiple dimensions, the multiverse, that, we are, one section floating around in what could be many different worlds and stuff. So maybe that's what's going on. I mean, it doesn't mean it isn't happening. It's just science says there's all these multiverses, so why couldn't that be the reason, or be what's happening? Is that the Earth is flat and it's surrounded by all these other kind of things.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I really personally believe in it, but I definitely think it's interesting. And who am I to say that that's not how it is? I've never been to space. You know what I mean? I've never left the country. So for the best of my knowledge, it could be true. Personal knowledge. Personal experience. Good.
Yeah, I don't know that I really believe it, but like I said, it falls in with some of what, like all good conspiracies do, they fall into part of what science has to say on certain things. So the multiverse theory helps it for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily believe in it, but yeah.
And the fact that the government's locked down certain parts of the planet you're not supposed to go to, and all this stuff, and how there hasn't really been any small groups of people trying to get into space.
Mm-hmm.
And all this other stuff. They say it's too expensive and all this stuff, but it's just all part of the theory. But that's pretty much all I have to say. We're approaching 2 hours here soon too, so.
All right. Well, I'm gonna move on to my my next thing here that I have, and mine has to do with a big conspiracy that most people that are into conspiracies are familiar with, and that's with the JFK assassination.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but this takes on a whole different story of what I'm going to talk about, and we'll just get right to it. And that the shot that the last shot that hit the president in the head was not from Lee Harvey Oswald, was not from someone on the grassy knoll, but was an accidental firing by one of the Secret Service agents.
I haven't heard that one. I've heard there was 3 different people that shot him, but I haven't heard that version of it. That's interesting.
Yes. Now, at first, I just want to say right off that it was an accident. Okay. It wasn't they weren't part of a conspiracy. It wasn't intentional. It was an accidental discharge that hit the president in the back of the head. Okay. So what happened with this is that comes from a gentleman by the name of Howard Donahue. He wrote a book along with it's his theory, and then he had another gentleman that helped him write this book. And the book is called Mortal Error, The Shot That Killed JFK. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so what happened is, they're on Dallas. They're in Dallas on that day, and they're heading with the motorcade. And behind the motorcade, you have Kennedy's car in front, everyone's seen, and the follow car behind it with Secret Service agents in it, codenamed Queen Mary. So they're heading down in the motorcade, and they turn on towards Daly Plaza, and they're heading down the slope there on the hill. If you've ever been there, or if you've seen any films of it, it kind of goes on a downgrade, and the 6th floor book depository is going to be back to the right of the cars. Okay, and that's where Lee Harvey Oswald took shots from. Now, Dunham in his book says Lee Harvey Oswald shot the president. He was an assassin shooting at the president. This theory does not take away from any other theories that there was a conspiracy, that there was someone on the grassy knoll, or anything like that. It just says that the shot that hit the president in the head was an accident. So as they're heading down the thing, the first shot rings out. Okay, bam. Kennedy. The car is missed. It's a ricochet, which according to this theory, hits the ground, and part of it hits Kennedy in the back of the head, and that's important. The next shot from Lee Harvey Oswald, you hear bam again, hits the president in the back. Okay, comes through the front of him, and in the Zapruder film, you see the president raise his shoulders up and he grabs his throat. That bullet also goes and hits, Governor Connolly in the shoulder, and then goes through Connolly, hits him in the wrist, and goes through his wrist and hits the knee. That's the so-called magic bullet that everyone talks about. Mm-hmm. So while this is all happening, the Secret Service, of course, is, they're doing their thing. They're going into action. So the first shot, when it goes off, a gentleman by the name, what was his name? This is the guy that accidentally did. His name's Agent George Hickey. He hears the shot, okay? The first one. Hears that it's coming from behind to the right. Turns to look for, where'd this shot come from? He sees Oswald up in the window, okay? So he reaches down into the car. Okay, he's in the back seat of the follow-up car, and he's sitting up on the back of the back seat, and his feet are on the seat, okay, because mm-hmm. It's also a convertible. He reaches down to the floor to grab the newly issued M16 or AR-15. We're all familiar with the AR-15 and the M16. We hear so much about it today in the news. He's reaching down for it, and he's bringing it up. He flips off the switch. Okay. Now, the second shot is fired, which hits Kennedy in the back, the so-called magic bullet, as they like to call it. And the motorcade is now accelerating forward to get out of the kill zone. This is what the Secret Service does. Something like this happens, they're gonna move the cars. Okay. Hickey loses balance in the car because it's accelerating, because he's standing on the seat. Okay, he's not on the floor. He's standing on the seat, loses balance, falls backwards, and accidentally discharges the weapon, which hits Kennedy in the back of the head.
Wow.
Now, the gentleman, Howard Dunham, who did this and came up with this theory is a ballistics expert and worked with insurance companies and with police to help solve crimes on bullet trajectory and where the bullet came from, what type of gun it was, and all this type of thing. And he got involved in the Kennedy assassination because he was one of the 11 shooters that the Warren Commission had come and do test firings to see if Lee Harvey Oswald could actually get those shots off in the allotted time period. And he actually bettered the 5.6 second window that supposedly Oswald did the shots in. And he did better than that. He actually bettered that time with the 3 shots. He was the only one to better the time. And this man is an expert in where bullet trajectories and all that kind of stuff. And all of his research, after looking at like the pictures of the skull and all the information that he got, is that when he looked at a cast of Kennedy's skull, the bullet hole in the back that was supposedly the fatal shot, the hole is smaller than the cartridge that Oswald was shooting. So it couldn't have come from Oswald's gun, but it was the right size for the caliber of the M16.
Oh, wow.
It also, the skull had fragments of in it, shrapnel from the casing of the bullet that hit Kennedy. The gun that Oswald was shooting was a full metal jacketed bullet. They're for deep penetration, those type of bullets. They don't fragment. Mm-hmm. Okay, where an M16 bullet is designed to fragment when it hits the body, it causes more damage. So there were fragments within the skull. There was also what they call the unknown wound on the back of Kennedy's head, and that was from the shrapnel of the ricochet of the first shot that Oswald missed when it hit the ground, and Kennedy got hit back in the back of the head with that. He shows that the angle that the bullet entered the head and where it hit the skull, it couldn't have come from Oswald's gun, and that it ended up coming from the Secret Service, and it was an accidental shooting. And that's why so many of the things that took place afterwards were so weird, that the Secret Service wouldn't allow the doctors to immediately do an autopsy, that Kennedy's brain went missing, all these different things that took place because the Secret Service was like, look, Kennedy, the reason they covered it up is because the theory was that Kennedy was already mortally wounded with that second shot that went in through his back, shattering his vertebrae and coming out the front of him. That was probably already a mortal wound. Mm-hmm. And they had Oswald as the shooter. Why we don't need to let people know that this happened with us. It's just going to turn into a big mess and cause a lot of problems.
Secret Service killed Kennedy.
Let's just keep it quiet. But it does not take anything away from any of the other conspiracies that Oswald was involved in a conspiracy to kill the president. There could have been somebody on the grassy knoll. It doesn't take away from any of that type of thing.
That's just another theory.
Yeah, but when you read the details of it and everything, and you look at like the bullet trajectory and the fact that this guy's an expert and all of the things, it makes sense. And there is a photograph of George Hickey holding the AR-15 in the car shortly after the assassination, as they're speeding down the highway and taking them to Parkland Hospital.
I thought it was an M16.
Yeah, I meant M16.
Oh, gotcha. It's okay.
You see him holding the M16 in his hand. So to me, it's one of the theories that really, I think, holds a lot of water. It really makes sense that it really could have been an accident, that he lost his balance and accidentally discharged. It was a new It was a new weapon that had been assigned to the Secret Service. They hadn't had it for that long. And supposedly Hickey wasn't even the guy who was the agent who was supposedly trained to use the weapon. Supposedly, what I heard in the past in a documentary about this was that the night before, the agents were in Dallas getting things ready, making sure everything was okay for Kennedy's arrival, and they were all finished with their stuff, and they went out for a few drinks. And the agent that was supposed to handle the weapon had too many drinks the night before and was kind of out of it the next day, and he wasn't there. So they told George Hickey, you're going to be in charge of the weapon. And they gave him a once over on it and everything, but he hadn't really handled it before. It's nothing against him. I mean, the Secret Service does a great job. It was a freaking accident that, he reached down to get the gun, the car accelerated, he falls backwards and accidentally discharges the gun, and it hits Kennedy. Freaking one of the better explanations I've ever heard, and makes a lot of sense why all the things that happened afterwards.
Yeah.
Secret Service. And the book's called Mortal Error. You can pick up the book still today. It's available. And you can also read the whole article. I'll put this all in Discord again, like everything else, and you can read all about it.
All right.
Exactly what they say. It's a crazy conspiracy, but I think it's one that actually makes sense. I kind of think this might have happened.
Yeah, I'm not sure myself, but it's definitely interesting at the very least. And I do think with that, as fun as it is, I do think we need to move on to the next article.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
It's we'll keep it really short, even though I can't imagine that's going to happen, because this is a topic that both David and I very thoroughly enjoy. It's a conspiracy theory we both enjoy, at least to my understanding. And that theory would be, what do you call it? Contrails.
Good old contrails.
Yeah, but the theory that I came across, it's all part of the same thing. It's all part of the same painting. But this part of the painting says that one of the main reasons too, apart from trying to like control people or like make people like make them easier to like sedate them or whatever flavor of contrails you want to take, is this theory is saying that the reason why they put all that stuff in the contrails and why they put all that stuff in the water, all the chemicals in both the contrails. If anybody doesn't know what a contrail is, a contrail is supposed to be when you look up in the sky and you see a plane go over and it leaves a big like a cloud trail behind it, that's a contrail. And they say that people or governments put chemicals into that for either helping with weather, for tracking weather tracking information, or that they use it to essentially poison everybody. That's just to sum it up. It's a summary. But this theory in particular states that the reason why they do that is to suppress people from becoming spiritually awakened.
Okay, I've heard that one. Yeah.
Yep. And they say that the reason why they do it is because it goes into even more detail. And they say the reason why they do it is there are very particular people that the government believes are going to come into existence at some point, and they're trying to blanket sedate everybody so that these particular people will not be able to spiritually awaken. So let's say, for example, this isn't what I think, and this isn't what this theory said specifically, but I'm going to say it as an example to better understand what I'm trying to get to, is that, so let's say, for example, in the Bible it says Jesus is going to come back at some point. Well, the whole theory behind what they're doing is, let's say Jesus is going to come back and they don't want Jesus to come back and spiritually be there for everybody and take them off to do whatever, that they would blanket the earth with all these chemicals and put all that stuff in your water to make it so Jesus wouldn't be able to do that stuff, that he wouldn't be spiritually awoke, if that makes sense. That's just an example.
I see what you're saying.
That's just an example. Obviously, you can get in a bunch of semantics there, but that's just an example I'm making. They didn't say that. But that's the whole theory behind it, is that the reason why they do it, too, is that somehow the government works with the whole CIA and how you're saying MK Ultra and a lot of the other stuff that they've done with telekinesis and astral projection, all that stuff, is that they're doing it very much to prevent certain people that the government has predicted will come into existence, to try to counteract them, kind of like in the Bible where the king went through and killed all the firstborn children to try to prevent Jesus from being born.
Yeah, okay.
Except not killing everybody, just sedating their mind, like handicapping them.
Yeah, so they're trying to keep people from awakening spiritually?
Correct. That's the theory.
All right, similar to the fluoride in the water because it calcifies
Correct.
the pineal gland.
Correct.
Okay.
They're both hand in hand, essentially, based on this theory.
All right, I hadn't actually heard that one.
You heard similar to it.
I've heard similar things to it, yes, but not that specific. Like I've heard more of the stuff in the water.
Yeah.
For that, stuff with contrails that I've heard about have been more to control weather is one of the things. Also to terraforming the planet. In a way that is more suitable for the alien beings that we're in contact and not for humans.
Yep.
That's a big one that is out there. Also, I've heard for keeping people from being able to grow their own food, that the chemicals they're putting into it is actually damaging our soils. And so people will not be able to grow their own food and will have to rely on large companies, corporations to grow the food. Because they're only spraying certain areas.
That's probably why they show against hydroponics then for local people. But the other thing, the reason why they say like the whole contrail thing is also for just has like the same kind of thing that water is because they're putting lithium and stuff supposedly into the contrails, and lithium has been used to sedate people mentally. Yeah, and that's one of the theories behind it. Is when they put high amounts of lithium in there, they say they're using it to test weather stuff. When people are saying in reality they're doing it to handicap the mind.
Yeah, the difference for people that don't know between when you see an airplane up in the sky and it's going and you see the trail behind it, that trail, if it's not one of these contrails, it will kind of just dissipate off fairly quickly. But these contrails that they're talking about with these chemicals and different things in it, they don't dissipate out. What you'll find is that they spread outward almost like a blanket.
They look like blanket clouds. Yep. I know exactly what you're talking about. That's why you can see sometimes there's ones, you see a plane up in the sky and there's a very short trail behind it and it just disappears, and then you see ones that go over and then it just spreads out into a blanket across the sky.
Exactly. And also you'll see where they're spraying, you'll actually see a crisscross pattern. The plane will continue to go back and forth in different directions, and will just cover the whole entire sky with these contrails. And there's a lot of people that say hasn't there been like some whistleblowers on this too, who have come out and said that the government is actually
putting really bad chemicals.
Yeah, for all different reasons. Nobody's quite sure exactly what the reason is. There's a lot of different theories, as we said.
Well, it goes back. I'm 26, and it goes back to, I've heard people older than me always say that the sky used to be much bluer when they were younger, and they don't mean that as like just to make an example of something. They're saying it and they're very seriously meaning it. They said they remember the sky being so much bluer than what it is today, and if they are putting stuff in the air, that could definitely affect the appearance of the sky.
Yeah, I've heard also that it's possible like they're trying for to help with global warming, so they're trying to help cool the planet with it.
Yeah, I heard that too.
Trying to heat the planet with it. That's the terraforming one. There's a lot of different theories. I'm not that knowledgeable on contrails, as I probably should be. But I've heard a lot of the different theories though about it, and it could be all of them. Everything, single one we mentioned, could be it too. It could be a combination of all of them, actually.
It could be the multiple choice answer that says all of the above.
I've also heard that it's also something to do with HARP in Alaska. That what they're putting into the air has something to do with HARP, and that
to help them control the weather.
Somehow enhancing HARP in some way. Yeah, well, HARP supposedly is a weather modification device. That's one of the theories about what HARP is. Okay. We're gonna have to do another evening on conspiracies because there's a lot more we could.
We could do a part 2 sometime.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely.
But I think that's probably a good place to call it for the night, though.
All right. Well, it was definitely a good night, and I'm definitely want to read on more of what you were talking about in your conspiracies, because I found some of them very interesting. And anybody else that wants to read more about what we were talking about tonight, we post everything in our news feed so that you can come into our Discord and you can read all about the different stuff there if you'd like.
Yep. And with that, you all have a good night. I hope you enjoyed tonight's episode. Thank you, David, for once again co-hosting the Space King podcast with me.
Thank you, Jericho. Have a nice evening. Good night.
Good night.